Combating bullying in business is our next topic. Bullying in Australian workplaces continues to be a major issue. According to WorkSafe, 1 in 3 women, 1 in 5 men report mental health issues stemming from harassment or bullying at work. Here to discuss at the desk is Karen Gately from Corporate Dojo and host of Ticker's Black Belt Leader, which goes to air later on today. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
We spoke about Janet last week, who has been in a little bit of trouble with Ticker in our mind. Janet's a made-up 55, I think we said, 55-year-old
I think
woman.
She might have been 57.
Could be Jason as well, could be anyone in that situation or age group. We're not being ageist or nameist, but harassment and bullying at work. Let's talk about the bullying aspect, because it is very hard to describe exactly what bullying is. What's it in your mind?
Look, I think it's very clear in the eyes of the law that, bullying is targeted, it's repeat behaviour, and it causes someone to feel humiliated, embarrassed, intimidated. They are clearly states of emotional distress as a consequence of what we're experiencing in the workplace. So, again, the conversation I have with a lot of leaders is to understand that, our intentions is not the main issue here under consideration. It's what is the impact of the behaviours.
Is it sometimes hard to know what that impact is, though? And does that mean that there are some businesses, some managers out there who are just completely unaware that they're in this situation? And how do you overcome that without it going to court?
Look, I think I refer to those people as the unconscious bullies. They don't have an intention to have that impact, but the reality is their behaviours still have that flow-on impact to their people. So, for example, if I'm getting angry, I'm getting aggressive, I'm having a go at people because they've made a mistake, those are behaviours that I might be thinking, oh, that's just me letting off steam.
So you're a perfectionist, or you have OCD, or you have high expectations of yourself, and therefore you do of your team as well. Forgetting that maybe your team isn't on the same amount of money as you, and therefore they're not as committed as you. They don't sit up at night thinking about how they can do the same job as you, because they don't do the same job as you.
That's right. And so obviously what we're talking about right now is when the leader gets himself into trouble, but clearly individuals as well, when they are interacting in the workplace, sometimes when they're accused of bullying, can be sincerely taken by surprise in that. So it is a confronting thing to suddenly be told that you're a bully. But I think, the most important thing is to really have awareness around your impact on other people. So, the way you're speaking, the way you're behaving, what flow and impact is that having.
Is that where HR departments need to get closer involved? Because there's no point doing it at the end. There's no point coming through at the end. And if it's just one person making the claim, is it less likely to be taken seriously than if it's an entire organisation that comes together and says, or an entire department who comes and says, my boss is bullying me? How do departments look at these things?
Look, again, obviously it very much depends on the organisation and their commitment to their culture. In my experience, the best way to combat bullying is to actually build a workplace culture that the foundations are respect, and that we have a baseline expectation that when you are interacting with your peers, with your superiors, with your direct reports, that there is a respectful tone, there's a respectful approach in the way you deal with things. So, again, as you've said, trying to tackle the issue after it's actually happened is problematic. So it's, in my experience, if one person raises concern, clearly that should be given the same level of priority and taken seriously.
On the other side, we see a lot of unfair dismissal claims where the person in that position who has been accused of bullying is let go or feels that they can no longer continue in the role, leaves the organisation, and then the company is slapped with I guess their own version of a bullying claim by the person who was accused of bullying.
And again, it can go round and round in circles, and in terms of people can try it on.
And on and on and on.
Leaders will say to me, that they've pulled the bullying card because I'm trying to performance manage them. Again, the law is really clear on the difference between healthy, respectful coaching, remedial feedback, and holding people accountable. You absolutely can have tough love conversations with people about their conduct, about their performance, hold them to account, and be nowhere near the line of bullying. Bullying happens when, again, the respect is not there and we step over the line and conduct ourselves in ways that the reasonableness rule always applies here, you know. So how would any reasonable person feel about that behaviour? You know, and so when the reasonableness rule is applied, and, you know, absolutely we can say that, well, the average person would be humiliated or intimidated by that behaviour, then it's actually just not okay. You know, whether we're leaders or individuals, we have a very real responsibility to make sure, as a starting point, our workplaces are healthy and safe. And that's why, obviously, Safe Work have a strong focus on that, because, you know, the psychological injury and consequences of bullying can be extreme.
Think about Janet as well? Like, sometimes there are reasons that go beyond a person's personality, right? That, for example, they may be in a position, I think of the military, where there's a lot of PTSD cases that come through, and there's a lot of drill sergeants, so to speak, I'm not sure if that's the term in Australia, who you know, are accused of bullying. It's obviously a workplace where there is an element of, come on mate, pick it up and don't feel sorry for yourself.
That's right.
Does that make it harder when we do have organisations out there where the job is hard, the job is inherently difficult,
That's right.
the job tests leaders to the absolute utmost?
That's
Is
right.
it up to the organisation to look after those people in leadership positions to make sure that they're okay?
Yeah, I think it's up to organisations to look after
the organisation to rock up later and say there's a bullying claim against you when we haven't done anything to help you through what will be a tough time.
That's exactly right. And I think, you know, the classic example of that is promoting people, as we talked about Janet, promoting them into a leadership role because they're a driven, successful individual, not providing them with the guidance and training around how do you coach other people, how do you deal with people when they're not behaving effectively or they're not performing effectively.
So what do you say to Janet in that situation? So there's been a couple of complaints that have been made against Janet from a bullying standpoint or a harassment standpoint. You meet with Janet, you let her know that where things are at. Is there too much of a rush these days to just get rid of people as opposed to working through an issue with people? Because it's quite possible that Janet's replacement will face the same circumstances.
Absolutely. No, I certainly wouldn't be, you know, depending on the severity of the issue, clearly. But if we're just talking about people have complained because Janet has been really aggressive or demanding or embarrassed them in front of the rest of the team, then, you know, clearly the first step for any human being is giving them fair and reasonable opportunity to understand the reality, understand what behaviours drove you know, the circumstances, and helping them especially to unpack what's going through their minds, because when we're behaving in ways that are destructive, often it's a frustration, often it's emotions that we're dealing with that are coming out in, you know, the words or the tones that we're using. So
what happens in a situation, just kind of thinking from the other perspective, from an employer's perspective, where you have an employee who is the wrong fit for the organisation? You're trying to manage them out because there are so few tools for a manager to deal with someone who is the wrong fit, particularly if they've reached their 6-month probation period, or they could be a casual where they don't even have a 6-month probation period. You're scared to death of an unfair dismissal lawsuit for letting them go. You're trying to come up with ways to deal with them. Perhaps you don't let them go on their holidays when they want to, and they turn around and say, I'm being bullied. That is a really common situation and a really tough situation for businesses too. It's almost a lose-lose.
Well, look, you know, in my view, because again, I think that the fear is very real and it's very common. I can't fire people in my business because I'll be accused of bullying, will end up in, you know, unfair dismissal situations or claims. And, you know, the reality is that we can't afford to keep people in our businesses who are fundamentally not suited to being there, whether it be because of cultural alignment or performance. So we need to deal with the issues, but again, the way we deal with it needs to be respectful. Just because somebody is underperforming doesn't mean they deserve to be treated with, you know, a lack of courtesy and a lack of sensitivity.
Absolutely.
So we need to master the art of delivering the truth with respect and sensitivity that creates the opportunity for people to understand their reality, take ownership and do something about it. Now, if they don't want to step up and take ownership and shift their behaviour and shift their attitude, then they can't be here. But we need to have guided them through some very honest conversations, some empathetic, you know, in many circumstances like Janet, some empathetic recognition that your frustrations are not unfounded. The way you're dealing with it is not healthy or helpful. So again, when we can engage with those people, help them to feel understood, help them to feel supported, often their behaviours will fundamentally change because they're not a bully at heart. Their behaviour is bullying, but that's not the intention.
They go home to their 8 cats.
That's right.
Karen, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time. Appreciate it, and look forward to your program later on today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll take a break. When we come back, Miles Primrose for our Tradies Tuesday segment, talking about how tradies can be as good at their business as they are at their trade. That's next.